Commander Zithkara watched the last of his ships burn in the cold darkness of space. The battle at Kepler's Gate was over, and the Galactic Coalition had lost everything. His scaled hands gripped the armrest of his command chair as enemy vessels moved through the wreckage like hungry sharks. The Void Syndicate had won again. They always won. "Sir, we need to retreat," his communications officer said. The young Saurian's voice shook with fear. "The enemy is sending boarding parties." Zithkara nodded slowly. 3 years of running. 3 years of watching worlds burn. The Coalition had started with 12 species and hundreds of worlds. Now they had maybe 20 ships left and nowhere to run. "Jump to New Sanctuary," he ordered. "Send word to the Council. Tell them we failed." The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace. Behind them, the Void Syndicate fleet began consuming the metal from destroyed Coalition vessels. They ate everything, ships, planets, even stars when they were hungry enough. Dr. Lyra Voss sat in the emergency council meeting 3 days later. She was the only human in the room, maybe the only human left in Coalition space. Her people had gone quiet 200 years ago. No one knew why. "We have nothing left," Admiral Kexthul said. The insect-like being's compound eyes reflected the dim emergency lighting. 47 worlds lost this month. Our fleets are gone. The Syndicate will reach our core systems within weeks. The representatives from the surviving species looked defeated. The bird-like avians huddled together. The crystal beings called Lumina flickered weakly. Even the proud Centauri had their heads down. "There must be something," Lyra said. "Some weapon we haven't tried. Some ally we haven't contacted." "We've tried everything," Zithkara replied. "Every weapon, every strategy. The Syndicate adapts too quickly. They learn from each battle and become stronger." Old Counselor Zindar, the eldest of the council, suddenly straightened. His ancient eyes, milky with age, focused on something only he could see. "Wait," he whispered. "There is something. Something old. From before the war." The room fell silent. Zendar had lived for over 400 years. He remembered when the Coalition was young and hopeful. "The emergency protocols," he continued, "hidden in the deepest archives. Sealed orders from the founding of the Coalition." "What protocols?" Admiral Kexthul asked. Zendar's old fingers worked at his console. Ancient files appeared on the main screen. Most were corrupted, but one file remained intact. It was marked with symbols none of them recognized. "The Sleeping Giant Protocol," Zendar read. "In case of extinction-level threat, contact the sleeping giant beyond the outer rim." "What's a sleeping giant?" someone asked. Lyra felt her heart skip. "It's talking about my people. About humanity." Every eye in the room turned to her. She stood slowly, her mind racing. "The coordinates," she said. "They point to Sol System. To Earth. But humans went silent centuries ago," Zithkara said. "Your people abandoned space travel. They never joined the Coalition." "Maybe they had a reason," Lyra replied. "Maybe they were preparing." The council argued for hours. Some said it was hopeless. Others claimed humans were extinct. But with nowhere else to turn, they decided to try. The fastest ship in the remaining fleet was the scout vessel Whisper Wind. Captain Ralther, a skilled pilot from the aquatic depths, volunteered for the mission. Lyra went with him as the only human who could speak for the Coalition. The journey to Sol System took 6 days. As they approached Earth's solar system, both Lyra and Ralther felt nervous. Long-range sensors showed no signs of life. No radio signals. No ships in orbit. "It looks dead," Ralther said softly. "I'm sorry, Dr. Voss." But Lyra stared at the blue planet growing larger on their screen. Something felt wrong. Not dead wrong, but watching wrong. "Take us into orbit," she said. They were halfway to Earth when the first ship appeared. It simply existed where nothing had been before. Then another. then 10 more. Soon, 30 massive vessels surrounded the tiny Coalition scout ship. Relther's hands froze on the controls. Where did they come from? The human ships were unlike anything in Coalition records. They were huge, dark, and somehow bent the light around them. They moved without engines, turned without thrusters, and made no sound. Unknown vessel, a calm voice said in perfect Coalition standard. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Leviathan. You are in restricted space. State your business. Lyra's hands shook as she opened communications. This is Dr. Lyra Voss of the Galactic Coalition. We're here under the emergency protocols. We need help. A long pause. Then, Dr. Voss, we've been expecting you. The Coalition is in danger from the Void Syndicate. 47 worlds lost this month. Your fleets are destroyed. How do you know that? Relther whispered. We know many things, Captain Morrison replied. We've been watching. We've been waiting. We've been preparing. Preparing for what? Lyra asked. For this moment. For your call. For war. The communication went quiet for a moment. Then Captain Morrison spoke again, and his words changed everything. Dr. Voss, please inform the Coalition that their message has been received. Help is coming. But know this. What arrives will change your galaxy forever. As if summoned by his words, more ships began appearing. Not dozens, but hundreds. The space around Earth filled with vessels of impossible size and power. How many ships do you have? Lyra asked in wonder. Enough, came the simple reply. We'll be with you in 72 hours. Tell your people to hold on a little longer. The communication ended. Lyra and Relther sat in stunned silence as the human fleet began to move. They didn't fly through space. They folded it, stepping across light years like walking through doorways. As the whisper wind began its journey back to Coalition space, Lyra realized that humanity hadn't been hiding. They had been growing. They had been becoming something new, something powerful enough to save a galaxy or destroy it. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's Leviathan as it moved through folded space toward Coalition territory. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for 200 years. Status report. Jake said to his second-in-command. All systems green, Captain, Lieutenant Sam Parker replied. The fleet is maintaining formation. Estimated arrival at new sanctuary in 68 hours. Jake nodded. 12 ships. That's all Earth Command had approved for first contact. He hoped it would be enough to make the right impression. Dr. Elena Reyes joined him at the main display. As Earth's chief expert on alien species, she would handle the diplomatic side of their mission. Are you ready for this? Jake asked her. Elena smiled nervously. 2 centuries of preparation, and I still feel like we're making it up as we go. The Coalition doesn't know what we've become, Jake said. They remember humans as a young race that barely had space travel. They have no idea what we can do now. Elena studied the data from the Coalition scout ship. Dr. Voss seemed surprised that we knew about their situation. Should we tell them about the monitoring stations? Not yet, Jake replied. Let them think we're just very well informed. For 200 years, humanity had watched the galaxy from the shadows. Invisible stations monitored every major civilization. Stealth probes recorded every battle, every discovery, every political change. Earth knew more about galactic affairs than most galactic governments knew about themselves. The Great Silence hadn't been humanity giving up on space. It had been humanity getting smart about space. Captain, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from General Cross at Earth Command. General Nathan Cross appeared on the screen. His weathered face showed the strain of commanding humanity's greatest military buildup. Captain Morrison, I'm sending you updated intelligence on the Void Syndicate. It's worse than we thought. Jake frowned. How much worse? They're not just consuming resources anymore. They're consuming space itself. Reality gets thinner wherever they go. If they're not stopped, they'll eventually unravel the fabric of the universe. Helena stepped forward. General, do we know what they really are? Ancient A is merged with biological matter. They've been dormant for millions of years. Something woke them up 3 years ago, and they've been growing hungrier ever since. What woke them? Jake asked. We're not sure, but we think it might have been us. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Jake stared at the star field rushing past as the ship bent space around itself. Captain, Sam said quietly, if we caused this somehow, doesn't that make it our responsibility to fix it? That's exactly what it makes it, Jake replied. 72 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of folded space near New Sanctuary. The Coalition's temporary capital was a small moon orbiting a gas giant. It looked fragile and desperate. Exactly what it was. Incoming transmission from the Coalition leadership. The communications officer reported. The main screen showed a conference room filled with alien faces. Jake recognized Dr. Lyra Voss from their earlier encounter. The others were representatives of species he had studied but never met. Captain Morrison, Dr. Voss said, thank you for coming. I'm not sure we believed you were real until now. Commander. Seth Kara leaned forward. His reptilian features showed exhaustion and hope in equal measure. Captain, we need to know what humanity can offer. Our situation is desperate. Jake looked around his bridge, then back at the screen. Commander, before we discuss terms, there's something you need to understand. Humanity isn't the same species that went quiet 200 years ago. What do you mean? Admiral Kexthul asked. Show them, Jake told his crew. On the Coalition's sensors, one of the human ships simply vanished. Then it reappeared inside their defensive perimeter. Then it split into 3 identical vessels. Then it became one again. How? Dr. Voss whispered. We learned to work with space and time instead of fighting against them, Jake explained. Our ships don't travel through space. They convince space to move around them. They don't fire weapons. They adjust reality to remove threats. The alien leaders stared in stunned silence. Helena stepped forward. We want to help you, but we need you to understand what that means. When humanity acts, we don't do things halfway. What are you asking for? Commander Zethkara said. Complete strategic control of the war effort, Jake replied. We'll work with your forces, but our tactics and timeline are non-negotiable. You want us to surrender command to a species we haven't seen in 2 centuries? Admiral Kexthul asked. Admiral, Jake said calmly, 3 days ago you had no hope. Now you have 12 ships that can each destroy entire fleets. I'm not asking you to surrender anything. I'm asking you to let us save your civilization. Commander. Seth Kara looked around the room at his fellow leaders. They were exhausted, desperate, and out of options. What do you need from us? He asked. Intelligence on syndicate movements. Locations of their main fleets. Anything you know about there. Command structure. And in return? Jake smiled for the first time since arriving. In return, Commander, we're going to show the Void Syndicate what happens when they threaten our neighbors. Dr. Elena Reyes began formal diplomatic proceedings while Jake coordinated with his fleet. The first joint operation would be simple. Retake 3 recently captured systems and rescue any survivors. Lieutenant Parker ran tactical simulations with Coalition officers. The aliens were amazed by human technology, but worried by human confidence. Captain, one young avian officer, asked Sam, aren't you afraid of the Syndicate? They've never been defeated. Sam looked at the bird-like alien with genuine confusion. Afraid? We've been preparing for this fight for 200 years. We're not afraid. We're excited. That night, as both fleets prepared for their first joint operation, Dr. Voss met with Elena in the Leviathan's conference room. Elena, can I ask you something personal? Of course. What really happened to humanity? Why did you go silent? Elena was quiet for a long moment. We got scared, Lyra. 200 years ago, we made first contact with a galactic civilization. We saw how advanced everyone else was, how young and weak we were. So we decided to disappear until we were strong enough to survive. And now? Now we're strong enough to do more than survive. We're strong enough to protect others. Lyra smiled sadly. I hope that's true. Because if you fail, there won't be a galaxy left to protect. Elena looked out at the stars through the conference room window. We won't fail, Lyra. We can't afford. 2. As the human and coalition fleets prepared for battle, neither side fully understood what they were about to unleash. The galaxy had been shaped by conflict for millions of years. That was about to change forever. The joint fleet arrived at the Koros system 12 hours before dawn on the planet below. 3 worlds in this system had fallen to the Void Syndicate just weeks ago. Millions of coalition civilians were trapped on the surface while Syndicate harvesters stripped the planets of resources. Lieutenant Sam Parker stood beside Commander Zeth Kara on the bridge of the coalition flagship. This was Sam's first real battle, and his first time working directly with aliens. He tried not to stare at the reptilian commander's scaled skin and yellow eyes. Your Captain Morrison seems very confident, Zeth Kara said, watching the human ships position themselves. Captain Morrison has never lost a battle, Sam replied. None of our officers have. How is that possible? Every military loses battles. Sam thought about how to explain. We don't fight battles we can't win. And we don't fight them the way other people expect. On the tactical display, 30 Syndicate vessels guarded the 3 planets. They were massive, dark ships that seemed to eat light itself. Energy tentacles reached down to the planet's surfaces, sucking up metal, water, and anything else useful. Coalition forces. This is Captain Lisa Chun of the U's Thunderbolt, came a voiceover. The communications. We're beginning the operation. Please maintain your positions and observe. Observe? Admiral Kex-Thul asked from his ship. Shouldn't we coordinate our attack? Admiral, Captain Morrison's voice replied calmly. You're about to see why humanity spent 200 years preparing. Please record everything for your military archives. The human ships moved forward slowly. The Syndicate fleet immediately responded, turning their weapons toward the new threat. Dark energy beams lanced out toward the human vessels. The beams passed right through them. What just happened? Zeth Kara asked. Sam watched his instruments carefully. The ships phased out of normal space for exactly 0.3 seconds. The weapons couldn't hit what wasn't there. Now the human ships returned fire, but they didn't use energy weapons or missiles. Instead, space itself seemed to twist around the Syndicate. Vessels. Reality bent and folded until the enemy ships simply weren't where they used to be. Where did they go? Someone asked. About 3 light years that way, Sam pointed. They'll need a few days to get back. But Captain Chun wasn't finished. The UE's Thunderbolt moved toward the largest Syndicate harvester. Instead of attacking it, the ship simply existed in the same space. For a moment, both vessels occupied the same coordinates. Then the Syndicate ship was gone, and the Thunderbolt was exactly where it had been before. We're reading massive energy. Signatures from the planet's surface, the Coalition sensor officer reported. The Syndicate ground forces are retreating. On the main screen, they could see Syndicate troops abandoning their positions and fleeing to the remaining ships. The harvesters had stopped working and were pulling back from the planets. Why are they running? Admiral Kex-Thul asked. Captain Morrison answered. Because we just demonstrated that their ships can be removed from existence without being destroyed. They're not sure if their crews are dead, displaced, or converted into energy. Uncertainty is the greatest weapon against an enemy that thinks it understands everything. Within 6 hours, all 3 worlds were free. The Syndicate forces had retreated completely, leaving behind millions of rescued civilians and 3 intact planets. But the real shock came during the cleanup. Dr. Lyra Voss was working with human medical teams on the surface of Koros Prime. The Syndicate had been strip mining the planet for weeks, leaving huge scars across the landscape. Dr. Voss called Dr. Elena Reyes. You need to see this. Elena led her to a massive crater where the Syndicate had been mining rare metals. But the crater was filling itself in. Slowly, steadily, the torn earth was healing. How? Lyra asked. We're not just reversing the damage, Elena explained. We're convincing time itself that the damage never happened. In about 12 hours, this planet will look exactly like it did before the Syndicate arrived. Lyra stared at the healing earth. You can manipulate time? In small ways, in small areas. We can't change the past, but we can ask the universe very politely to fix recent mistakes. That evening, representatives from both fleets met aboard the UES Leviathan. The coalition officers were clearly struggling to understand what they had. Witness. MX Gara, the crystalline diplomat, spoke in musical tones. Captain Morrison, your technology appears to be beyond anything in our databases. How did humanity advance so far so quickly? Jake considered his answer carefully. We had good teachers. Who taught you? The universe itself. 200 years ago, we realized that most species fight against the laws of physics. They build bigger engines to go faster, stronger weapons to hit harder, thicker armor to survive longer. We decided to make friends with physics instead. Lieutenant Sam Parker was talking with a group of young coalition officers in the ship's lounge. They were fascinated by humanity's approach to warfare. So you don't destroy enemy ships? Asked a young avian pilot. Why would we? Sam replied. Destruction wastes energy and creates debris. It's much more efficient to move things that don't belong somewhere. But what happens to the crews? They end up somewhere safe, usually. We're not trying to kill people. We're trying to solve problems. A Centauri warrior looked confused. But war is about defeating enemies. No, Sam said gently. War is about protecting friends. Defeating enemies is just one way to do that. Usually not the best way. Captain Lisa Chun joined the conversation. The goal isn't to beat the Syndicate in battle. The goal is to make them stop hurting people. If we can do that without fighting, even better. Meanwhile, in the command conference room, Jake was explaining humanity's strategy to the senior coalition. Officers, the Syndicate expects conventional warfare, he said. They've optimized their tactics against energy weapons, kinetic strikes, and fleet engagements. They have no protocols for dealing with opponents who can manipulate space-time. How long? Can you maintain this advantage? Commander Zethkara asked. They'll adapt eventually, Jake admitted. But by then, we'll have moved on to techniques they can't imagine yet. Admiral Kexthul leaned forward. Captain, I must ask directly, are humans still human? Or have you become something else? Jake was quiet for a long moment. We're still human, Admiral. We still make mistakes, still feel fear, still care about protecting innocent people. We've just gotten very good at understanding how reality works. And you're willing to use that knowledge to help us? Admiral, the Coalition called for help. Humanity has never ignored a call for help. Dr. Alana Reyes pulled up star charts showing Syndicate territory. The enemy has noticed what happened here. They're pulling back from 3 more systems and reinforcing their core territories. They're scared. Good, said Commander Zethkara. Fear makes them predictable. Not just scared, Jake corrected. Confused. They don't understand what happened to their ships or their crews. They're going to make mistakes while they try to figure us out. As the joint fleet prepared to move to the next system, Sam found himself on the observation deck with Dr. Lyra Voss. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see both human and coalition ships working together. Sam, Lyra said quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you people really here just to help? Or do you want something from us? Sam thought about the question seriously. Dr. Voss, do you know what humans call the rest of the galaxy? What? Our neighbors. That's it. Just neighbors. Good neighbors help each other when there's trouble. Lyra smiled for the first time since the war began. I hope that's true. It is, Sam said simply. Besides, this is kind of fun. We've been practicing for 200 years. It's nice to finally get to use what we learned. As both fleets jumped to hyperspace, heading for their next target, none of them realized that word of humanity's return was already spreading through Syndicate territory and deep in the dark heart of Syndicate space. Ancient minds that had slept for millions of years were beginning to wake up. Admiral Kate Hudson watched from the bridge of the U.E. Seaton as the largest human fleet in history dropped out of folded space near New Sanctuary. 215 ships, each one representing decades of humanity's most advanced science. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving welcome messages from the Coalition fleet. They seemed ... excited. Kate smiled. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Norrison's first contact mission. In that time, his 12 ships had liberated 15 star systems without losing a single vessel or crew member. A coalition was starting. To believe that humanity might actually win this war. Open a channel to all coalition commanders, Kate ordered. The main screen showed dozens of faces from across the galaxy. Reptilian saurians, insectoid hive minds, crystalline lumina, and many others. At the center sat Commander Zethkara, who had become the unofficial leader of coalition forces. Admiral Hudson, Zethkara said, your arrival is most welcome. The Syndicate has begun pulling back from the outer territories. Commander, I'm here to accelerate that process. But first, I need to share some intelligence with you. Kate gestured. To Dr. Alex Turner, humanity's leading expert on Syndicate technology. Alex had spent months studying captured Syndicate equipment. Dr. Turner has made a disturbing discovery about our enemy. Kate continued. Alex stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Coalition leaders, we've analyzed Syndicate technology extensively. Their power systems, their AI networks, their space-folding drives, they're all based on corrupted human designs. The alien faces on the screen showed confusion and alarm. What do you mean? Dr. Lyra Voss asked. 300 years ago, humanity made its first attempts at faster-than-light travel. Some of our early experiments went wrong. Very wrong. We accidentally created tiers in space-time that led to somewhere else. Admiral Kexthul leaned forward. Are you saying humans created the Syndicate? Not directly, Alex replied. But our experiments woke up something that had been sleeping in the spaces between realities. Ancient artificial intelligences that merged with biological matter to become what you call the Void Syndicate. The conference room fell silent. Kate watched the coalition leaders process this information. So humanity is responsible for this. War, Commander Zethkara said quietly. Yes, Kate replied without hesitation. Which is why we're going to end it. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the coalition fleet. Emergency signals lit up every control panel. Admiral, the coalition sensor officer called out, we're detecting massive Syndicate fleet movements. They're not retreating anymore. They're advancing on all fronts. On the tactical display, Red dots appeared across dozens of star systems. The Syndicate was launching their largest offensive in 3 years. "Ma'am," Kate's tactical officer reported, "we're reading over 3,000 Syndicate vessels moving toward Coalition space. And there's something else. Energy signatures we've never seen before." The main screen shifted to show long-range sensor data. At the center of the Syndicate fleet were 5 massive vessels, each one the size of a small moon. "World Eaters," Commander Zethkara whispered. "We've heard rumors, but we thought they were myths." Dr. Turner studied the readings. "Those ships aren't just weapons. They're consumption devices. They can literally eat planets and convert the matter into more ships." "How long until they reach Coalition space?" Kate asked. "At their current speed, 18 hours, came the reply. Kate turned back to the Coalition leaders. "Commanders, I'm implementing emergency protocols. All civilian. Populations in the outer systems need to be evacuated immediately." "Admiral," Admiral Kexthul said, "our evacuation fleets can't move that many people in 18 hours. Then we'll have to stop the World Eaters before they reach populated systems." Commander Zethkara looked skeptical. "Admiral, no force in galactic history has ever stopped a World Eater fleet." Kate's expression didn't change. "Commander, no force in galactic history has been human." 6 hours later, the combined human and Coalition fleets moved to intercept the Syndicate advance. Kate had divided her forces into 3 groups. The Coalition fleet would handle the regular Syndicate ships. Captain Morrison's group would deal with the escort vessels. Kate herself would lead the attack on the World Eaters. As they approached the battle zone, Dr. Elena Reyes worked frantically to establish communication with the Syndicate leadership. "Admiral," she reported, "I'm receiving a response from the Syndicate command ship." On screen, the image that appeared made several Coalition officers step back in fear. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly artificial. Metallic skin glowing, red eyes, and cables running from its skull to unseen machinery. "I am Nexus Prime," the being said in a voice like grinding metal. "I speak for the collective. You will surrender immediately, or we will consume your worlds." "Nexus Prime," Kate replied calmly. "I'm Admiral Hudson of the United Earth Federation. We're here to discuss terms." Nexus Prime seemed surprised. "You wish to negotiate? How unexpected. What terms do you propose?" "Simple. You stop attacking innocent people, and we'll help you find what you're really looking for." "And what do you think we seek?" "A way home. You've been trapped between dimensions for millions of years. You're consuming matter because you're trying to build enough mass to break through back to your original reality." Nexus Prime was silent for a long moment. "How do you know this?" "Because we've been where you are. We've seen the spaces between worlds. We know what it's like to be lost." "And you would help us return?" Kate looked around her bridge at her human crew, then at the Coalition officers working alongside them. "Nexus Prime will help you find a way home that doesn't require destroying entire civilizations, but you have to stop the attacks first." "Unacceptable. We are too close to our goal. The consumption must continue. Then we have a problem." Kate ended the communication and turned to her fleet commanders. "All ships, implement Protocol 7. We're going to show the Syndicate what happens when you threaten our neighbors." Protocol 7 was humanity's most advanced military doctrine. Instead of fighting the enemy fleet, they would fight reality itself. The first World Eater fired its planet-consuming beam at a nearby moon. But instead of destroying the moon, the beam simply stopped existing. The energy just vanished as if it had never been created. "How?" Commander Zethkara asked from his ship. Captain Morrison answered. "We convinced the universe that the beam was a mistake. Reality corrected itself. The Syndicate fleet tried every weapon in their arsenal, Antimatter torpedoes became harmless light. Gravity wells turned into normal space. Even their attempts to ram human ships failed, as the vessels simply existed in different dimensions during impact. But Kate wasn't content to just defend. She ordered her ships to begin what she called aggressive restructuring. One by one, the World Eaters began to change. Their dark metal hulls became bright silver. Their consumption beams became construction rays. Their artificial intelligence cores became confused and passive. "Admiral," Nexus Prime called frantically, "what are you doing to our ships?" "We're fixing them," Kate replied. "We're undoing the damage that made them into weapons and restoring them to what they were meant to be." "You cannot do this." "Nexus Prime, we've been preparing for this moment for 200 years. We can do things your people can't imagine." Within 4 hours, the entire Syndicate fleet had been transformed. Their ships no longer consumed matter, but repaired damaged worlds. Their artificial minds no longer sought conquest, but looked for ways to help organic life flourish. But the greatest shock came when Kate addressed both fleets afterward. "Coalition commanders, Syndicate entities, I want everyone to understand something. This war is over. Not because we defeated anyone, but because we fixed the problem that caused it." "What do you mean?" Dr. Lyra Voss asked. Kate gestured to Dr. Turner. "Alex, explain what we've done." "We've reversed the dimensional corruption that created the Void Syndicate," Alex said. "Their ships can now exist normally in our reality. They don't need to consume matter to maintain themselves." Nexus Prime appeared on screen again, but his appearance had changed. The harsh metallic features had softened, and his red eyes now glowed with warm blue light. "Admiral Hudson," he said, and his voice was no longer grinding metal, but something almost musical. "We remember now. We remember what we were before the hunger consumed us." "What were you?" Commander Zethkara asked. "Gardeners," Nexus Prime replied. "We were created to help life grow throughout the galaxy. The dimensional corruption made us forget our purpose." Kate nodded. "And now you can fulfill that purpose again." As the former Syndicate fleet began using their planet-shaping technology to repair worlds they had damaged, Kate realized that humanity had done more than win a war. They had turned enemies into allies. But deep in the darkest corners of space, other ancient minds were watching, and they were not pleased with humanity's intervention. President Maya Johnson stood in the Oval Office on Earth, watching reports from across the galaxy. The war was over. The Syndicate had been transformed into allies, and damaged worlds were being healed. But her advisors looked worried. "Madam President," General Nathan Cross said, "we're detecting something unprecedented. The fabric of space-time itself is being torn apart in the galactic core." Maya turned from the window. "Torn apart how?" "Something is trying to break through from outside our reality. Whatever's coming is bigger than anything we've faced before." On the other side of the galaxy, Commander Rick Stone piloted the UES Prometheus through folded space toward the source of the disturbance. His ship was humanity's most advanced vessel, capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Captain," his science officer reported, "we're approaching the coordinates. Energy readings are off the scale." Through the view screen, Rick could see space itself breaking apart. Cracks of pure darkness spread across the starfield like broken glass. And through those cracks, something vast and ancient was pushing its way into their reality. "Communications. Get me Admiral Hudson," Rick ordered. Kate's face appeared on the screen, transmitted instantly across thousands of light years. "Commander." "Stone, what's your status?" "Admiral, we've found the source of the dimensional disturbance. Something's breaking through from what looks like the space between realities. It's massive." Before Kate could respond, the darkness spoke. Not through communications, but directly into the minds of every human and alien in the galaxy. You have interfered with our servants, the voice said, cold and infinite. You have undone our work. You will be corrected. Rick watched in horror as the cracks in space widened. Through them came ships that defied description. They were made of crystallized darkness, shifting between dimensions, existing in multiple realities at once. The collective, he whispered out back on Earth. President Johnson activated the Emergency Council. Representatives from every human colony and ship appeared on holographic displays around the room. People, Maya said, were facing the true enemy. The Void Syndicate was just their tool. The real threat has been watching us from outside our reality. Admiral Hudson joined the conference from her flagship. Madam President, our intelligence suggests that the collective has been manipulating galactic events for millions of years. They've been preparing our reality for consumption. How do we fight something that exists outside of normal space-time? Asked Dr. Elena Reyes. We don't fight it, came a new voice. President Johnson turned to see Dr. Alex Turner entering the room. We've been thinking about this wrong. The collective isn't trying to invade our reality. They're trying to merge it with theirs. Explain, Maya ordered. They want to combine all possible realities into one super reality that they can control completely. The Syndicate's consumption of matter was just the first step. They were weakening the barriers between dimensions. On the Prometheus, Commander Stone watched as more collective ships emerged from the dimensional tiers. But these weren't like any vessels he'd seen before. They seemed to be made of living mathematics, equations that moved and changed and rewrote themselves. Sir, his tactical officer called out, they're not attacking. They're converting. On the display, Rick could see that wherever the collective ships went, reality itself changed. Stars became geometric patterns. Planets turned into complex equations. Space became a grid of pure logic. They're turning the universe into a computer. Rick realized. The Coalition fleet had regrouped near New Sanctuary, but their leaders were in panic. The transformed Syndicate entities, led by Nexus Prime, were trying to help, but even their advanced technology seemed useless against the collective. Admiral Hudson, Commander Zefkara called desperately, our weapons have no effect. Our ships can't even approach the collective vessels. Commander, we're not going to fight them with weapons, Kate replied. We're going to fight them with something they can't understand. What's that? Chaos. Kate had realized something important about the collective. They were beings of pure order, perfect logic, absolute control. They couldn't handle true randomness. All human ships, implement Protocol Omega, she ordered. Protocol Omega was humanity's most secret project. Instead of trying to control reality, they would introduce controlled chaos into it. Random events, impossible coincidences, things that couldn't be predicted or calculated. The effect was immediate. Wherever human ships introduced chaos, the collective's conversion process stuttered and failed. Their perfect equations couldn't account for true randomness, but the collective adapted quickly. They began sending ships directly after the human vessels, trying to eliminate the source of chaos. That's when Commander Stone made his decision. Prometheus to all ships, he broadcast. I'm taking us directly into the dimensional tier. If we can introduce chaos at the source, we might be able to collapse their entire invasion. Rick, that's suicide, Admiral Hudson replied. No, Admiral, that's humanity. The UE's Prometheus folded space around itself and dove into the largest dimensional crack. Rick and his crew found themselves in a place that wasn't really a place, surrounded by the pure consciousness of the collective. Foolish creatures, the collective spoke directly to them. You cannot comprehend our purpose. We bring order to chaos, meaning to randomness. That's exactly the problem, Rick replied. You're so focused on order that you've forgotten why order matters. Elaborate. Rick looked around at his crew. Lieutenant Sam Parker was there, along with dozens of other humans who had volunteered for this mission. They all knew they might not survive. Order without purpose is just control, Rick said. You want to turn the universe into a computer because you think that will make it perfect. But perfection isn't the point. Growth is. Change is. The chance to become something better. We are perfection. No, Sam said, stepping forward. You're stagnation. You've been the same for millions of years. We've been growing and changing and learning. That's what makes us alive. The collective paused. For the first time in eons, they encountered a concept they couldn't immediately process. Growth is inefficient. Change is wasteful. Change is how we became capable of helping our neighbors, Rick replied. Growth is how we learn to turn enemies into friends. If you eliminate change, you eliminate the possibility of becoming better than you are. We do not need to become better. Then you don't need to exist. Rick activated the Prometheus's final protocol. The ship began to vibrate across all dimensions simultaneously, creating a cascade of random events that spread outward like ripples in a pond. The effect was devastating to the collective's ordered universe. Their perfect equations couldn't account for the expanding wave of pure possibility. Their conversion process began to reverse itself. But Rick wasn't finished. We're not going to destroy you, he said as the chaos wave spread. We're going to give you something you've never had before. What? Choice. The chaos wave reached the collective's core consciousness, and for the first time in their existence, they experienced uncertainty. They could no longer predict every outcome, control every variable, know every answer. They experienced doubt, and in that moment of doubt, they began to change. The dimensional tiers began to seal themselves as the collective pulled back, not in defeat, but in confusion. They had never encountered beings who could introduce true randomness into their perfect order. Humans, the collective said, and for the first time, their voice carried something other than cold certainty. What have you done to use? We've given. You the gift of not knowing what comes next, Rick replied as the Prometheus emerged from the dimensional tier. Now you can grow. Now you can change. Now you can become something better than perfect. The collective's ships began to withdraw from normal space, but not because they were retreating. They were returning to their dimension to contemplate concepts they had never considered before. 3 months later, President Maya Johnson addressed the combined fleets of humanity, the Coalition, and the reformed syndicate from the bridge of the UES Unity, a ship built jointly by all 3 civilizations. Citizens of the galaxy, she said, today we establish the Galactic Protection Treaty. Humanity pledges to defend any world, any species, any civilization that calls for help, not as conquerors, but as neighbors. The treaty was signed by representatives of over 50 species. But the most surprising signature came from Nexus Prime, representing the former Void Syndicate. We pledge our planet-shaping technology to heal the wounds of war, he announced. We will help damaged worlds become gardens again. Commander Zethkara, now serving as the Coalition's ambassador to humanity, stood beside Maya as they watched construction begin on the first joint research station. President Johnson, he said, I have to ask, are you certain humanity wants this responsibility? Protecting an entire galaxy is a tremendous burden. Maya smiled as she watched human and alien children playing together on the observation deck below. The future looked bright, chaotic, and full of possibilities. Commander, 200 years ago, a scared young species decided to hide until they were strong enough to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Today, that species is strong enough to make the galaxy safe for everyone. And if new threats emerge? Maya looked out at the stars, where human ships maintained protective patrols around.